Good afternoon, everybody. Parshat Teitzei. I'd like to dedicate this recording for the refuah shlema of my father-in-law, Reb Terence Tuvia ben Dvorah, that he should have a refuah shlema. As I introduced the Parsha of Teitzei last year in the same way, Parshat Teitzei deals with the mitzvot which relate to, I would say, the bizarre, the chaotic side of life. If we just take randomly some of the mitzvot, there's a big concentration of mitzvot, about 50 or so mitzvot in this week's parasha. So take the first mitzvah, the mitzvah of a person, basically a righteous and a tzaddik of a soldier who goes to war, and he sees in the captivity a Gentile woman. He becomes totally infatuated with her. He cannot control himself at all. This is speaking about a tzaddik in the time of war. He wants to marry her. How can he marry her and bring about some semi-type of geirut and still be with her? And this is like very, very absurd, sort of like a description of what the American soldiers went through in the Vietnam War, problems of rape and wanting to marry Vietnamese women, etc. And then the Torah speaks about a person, the third mitzvah, a person who's got a child who's basically an addict and a psychopath, someone who, according to the Gemara, is about between 13 years and 13 years and 3 months. Ben Sorer Morer, and he's already addicted to eating meat and to drinking wine, and he's set on a path that is capable of killing already at a young age in order to furnish his addiction. And what the Torah says is that he's put to death. These bizarre type of situations and how we relate to them. And finally, if we take the last mitzvah in the parasha, the mitzvah of mechiyat Amalek, of wiping out Amalek and annihilating Amalek, this is beyond the pale. And as I say, this is what most of this parasha speaks about, not technical damages, etc. Certainly not inspiring messages as we know them in Parshat, like in Parshat Ve'etchanan, Aseret HaDibrot, Kriyat Shema, but as I say, the more chaotic side of life. And in amongst all these mitzvot, the Torah speaks about the following, and in chapter 24, so in Pasuk 16, it says, Lo yomtu avot al banim, uvanim lo yomtu al avot, ish bechet'o yumatu. It says fathers shouldn't die because of their sons, and sons shall not die because of their fathers, and every man shall die for his sin. Now this is, it's simple. What does this mean? That a child shouldn't die because of a father and vice versa. Each one dies on account of his own sin. So the Ran, Rabbeinu Nissim, of the 14th century, he already says, is in commentary to the Gemara, that it's impossible to just take this at literal value. Of course, it's not like that. No court in Israel would do such a thing. The pshat is that it's speaking about, we add on one word, and that is the word of testimony. In other words, the court's not allowed to accept testimony of a father against the child, and vice versa, and a child's not allowed to bear testimony on his father. In simple language, this is one of the sources that a relative is not allowed to testify for another relative in court. This is a gzeirat hakatuv, decree, because even if you would take two brothers, like the Gemara says, Moshe and Aaron, which of course they're not chashudim, which means that they're not suspect of lying in a court, but nevertheless, those two brothers weren't allowed to testify one against the other. But actually, there's two novelties over here, which I want to share with you very briefly. The one is that as I said, it's a gzeirat hakatuv. This is like a decree from heaven that you can't have relatives even when there's no suspicion that they might be lying. In fact, some people go as far as to say that if a father would be prepared to testify against his own son, surely that is a sign and indication that the father is saying the truth. Because which father, which parent would go, who is so attached to his child, which parent now, even if the child isn't 100% Peseda, which parent will go now and testify in a court of law against the child? He would just turn a blind eye, or we would do something else to punish the child, but to go in front of a court and to testify against the child, he wouldn't do it if it wasn't true. So that's the chiddush of the Torah. The Torah is saying, even though there's room to say that no doubt the parent is speaking the truth, because otherwise he would never harm his child, the bond between parent and child is so great, so he must be telling the truth. So therefore the Torah says, not so, and a parent is not allowed to testify in a court of law against his child. But there's another dimension, and the dimension is like this. Whenever the Torah speaks about laws of which are geared and which are speaking to the courts of law, there's always some group of Mefarshim who say that the mechanism and the principles apply not only to a court of law, but to people themselves. In other words, to every single person is in some way a judge. In fact, in Pirkei Avot, we found many statements about people judging, even though they're not like judges in a court of law, but they judge situations. For example, in the Perek Rishon, in Pirkei Avot, it says over there that Rabbi Yoshua ben Prachya Omer, Hevei dane kol adam lekaf zechut. Judge every person favorably. And notice, I say in parenthesis, that because people you hear today in society that they are not to be judgmental. That's correct. But in Pirkei Avot, it understands that people are judgmental and people do judge. And the reason is because basically people have got a sense of right and wrong. It emanates from a person's being created in the image of God, and therefore he's got a certain amount of truth to him, and therefore when he looks at the reality, so he does judge willy-nilly. He can't help it, because that's what it means to be a human being, to weigh up whether something is right or wrong, true, false. That's what it means. That's dafka, the positive side of being judgmental. And therefore, instead of just saying outright, don't judge, in Pirkei Avot, in dafka, when it speaks about morality, it speaks about, certain rules about judgment. You want to judge someone, so then judge him favorably. See the whole picture. Or, for example, in the second perek of Pirkei Avot, Hillel says, instead of saying also don't judge, well, he says something close to it. He says over there, "V'al tadin et chavercha ad shetagia limkomo." Don't judge a person till you have gotten to his place. If you've gone through exactly what he's gone through, then you can start to judge. If you're not able, you haven't got the moral right to judge someone if you haven't been in his situation. Al kol panim, Hillel doesn't just say, you can never judge. He says, he puts a lot of restrictions, but there is room to be judgmental under certain conditions, like I've just explained. So in that context, what does it mean here that lo yomtu avot al banim uvanim lo yomtu? Rab Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, and it's developed by others, saying it like this. In society, how much suffering and how much pain have parents and children suffered, and relatives, because, let's say, the parent did something, and as a result, people say, because the parent has got such a background, they judge the child as well. Or because the child has done and acts in a certain way, so people then distance themselves from the parents because they say, look at the way the child behaves. And that's what this pasuk is saying. This pasuk is saying then that don't kill, right? It doesn't mean execute. It means don't kill someone's reputation. Don't kill his character. Don't assassinate him, right? A child because of what a parent did, or a parent because what a child did. How many people suffered because their parents or their children were criminals, or they did something wrong, or they did something embarrassing, and people then stand aloof. So this is what a great message over here that appears over here in Parshat Teitzei. In this context of chaos, of people who are sometimes the outcasts of society, and they dafka people who are fine. And the reason that they haven't been given a chance is because people have killed them, have killed the child because of the father, or killed the father because of the child. Yes, a character assassination. And so when this is another example of what we read about Kirka Avot, that to judge, don't judge. You can judge, we can judge, but be very careful. Judge ourselves, judge when we're judging others, to judge other people with righteousness, the kaf sechut, to see the whole picture, to try to see that which is favorable, and finally not to judge someone, as Hillel says, unless you got into his place, you were there in the same circumstances as he was, and you came out okay. And last of all, what is mentioned in this parasha, give every single person, judge him on his home. Don't judge him on the background and because of his parents, and vice versa. That we should all be able to judge each other and ourselves favorably, and then Be'ezrat Hashem, the Yom Adin, Kadosh Baruch Hu, we should all be zoche to have a good and favorable judgment, that we should all be chatumim l'chaim tovim l'shalom, that you should have always Shabbat Shalom.